Hold on to your butt.
Da-da-da. You were saying?
Welcome to episode 92 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. Tonight I am joined by the guy that has put up with me for 91 episodes in separate locations. But tonight, for episode 92, this is our first episode where we are recording in the same location, in separate rooms though. But he's a real trooper for that. And he's also the most awesome Civil War nerd I know, Darren Wakes. And I'm his co-host, Mare.
Very creative. Well, by your background, it seems like we'd be recording this on Culp's Hill at Gettysburg.
Wow,
which
you
we're not allowed. We're not allowed to be at dark, so that can't be the case. So anyway, what's going on with you? How are? It's good to be back. We are back after a month hiatus. Thank God those jurors saw it your way because we're back. Right. And now we get to do a whole new episode. Very cool. So how are things?
They're good. Yeah, I'm settling into life here in the United States as a student again, doing my master's in library science, and obviously we're in the same place now. So, and you haven't booted my ass out yet, so that's pretty good.
No. So it's definitely good. It's definitely good. Well, since you're hosting, I will ask you what you're drinking. Since you probably forgot how we do this, it's been so long.
Oh my
God!
I
will ask you, what are you drinking?
I am drinking Forever New England by Cisco Brewers out of Nantucket because it's New England Patriots beer, and they play their first game this Sunday for the season. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Cisco Brewers Whale Tail. Apparently, you're not drinking out of a mug or anything. You didn't talk
Oh, wait,
about
no,
it,
I'm sorry. No, I'm drinking it out of...
Wow, rusty.
The viewers can't see this, but it is a Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain 20th Maine glass, and because it's his birthday today. So that is actually one thing we're going to be talking about to start off, is it's Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's birthday.
Okay. And since you didn't ask, I will tell you, I'm drinking out of my British mug because my people lost our queen today. Very sad about that.
Your people?
My people, my British people, my heritage, my peeps. My peeps back in the homeland. So we're all getting through it best way we can.
Yep.
That's how it is.
Well, I do think we kind of need to say something about Queen Elizabeth because we are recording on, unfortunately, the day that she passed away. I'm Canadian. She's head of state for my country. And I think the world lost a very special lady today.
Nope, absolutely. I mean, she's been around for a long, long time, 70 plus years as queen. So,
big time.
That, and just like the old TV show from the 80s, it's time. Now it's Charles in charge, Mary. That's what it's time for that. So it's back. So Charles is back.
King Charles III, I think it is. But the other thing I was going to say is, like, she is a lady who witnessed so many different historical events in her lifetime. I think it was, what did you tell me, like 13 presidents and how many Canadian prime ministers, world leaders she's met, historical events, like you think World War II, Vietnam.
Somehow she never saw the Indians win a World Series as queen, which is hilarious.
You fucker.
Anyway, it's sad, she died in Scotland today. And as life is circular, Mary, as they say, full circle. Today we're going to talk about a guy who was born in Scotland.
We are.
So it's interesting we're going to talk about that. This guy we're going to talk about, I don't know if you know this, Mary, but he commanded a flank at Gettysburg, okay? He refused his line. He fought against overwhelming odds. And he led a bayonet charge to help save the Union bacon. And we're not talking about the guy with the mustache from Bowdoin.
I was going to say, you're not talking about Birthday Boy?
Birthday Boy. Okay, we're talking about, of course, David Ireland. We're going to talk a lot about him. Now, David Ireland's someone who, he was that guy who, despite all the heroics we're going to talk about, you're not going to find a David Ireland T-shirt on Steinway Avenue. God knows I've looked. You're not going to find one, okay? And we think it's, primarily, he doesn't get a lot of publicity because he, in the historical mainstream anyway, because he wasn't in the movie Gettysburg or Michael Shara's book Killer Angels. David Ireland's story is fascinating, and it's one that really needs to have a really bright light shined on it. He's somebody who just falls between the cracks, and we're going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Gettysburg. His story is a very fascinating one before Gettysburg and post Gettysburg. So I think it's time we give him his due. I think it's something that a lot of people talk about. They see the monument up there at Culp's Hill, but I think he's somebody who we need to take, as you like to say, Mary, a deep dive into this gentleman, David Ireland.
I would agree. Yeah, he's a guy who, as you said, there's so much more to him than just Gettysburg. He goes into the Western Theater, but to me, his story is just as fascinating as Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's. Like you said, there's so many similarities between the two. And one of the books I used for my research for this was Trudeau's Gettysburg. I was just reading in it to see what he had to say about David Ireland, and he does compare him to Chamberlain. He says, like Chamberlain, he faces, the odds are kind of against him, numerically.
Mhm.
He's got to think on the fly really, really quickly. But this is a guy that, Ireland doesn't just do this at Gettysburg. He has to do it elsewhere during the Civil War too, and his whole life is quite fascinating what he does. And he's the guy that he's obviously the next general we've chosen to talk about on the podcast, and
No,
he's the guy that's bringing us out of our hiatus, I guess you could say.
he is. He is. Like many participants in the Union Army, David Ireland, he wasn't born in the United States. Like we mentioned a few minutes ago, he was born in Scotland of all places, Mary. His last name is Ireland. We had some fun. You were trying to Google him and thought he was in the Irish Brigade.
Does he lead
last
the
week.
Irish Brigade?
Funny.
Yeah, I fully admit.
But he was born in a place called Forfar. He was born on May 9th, 1832. He was the son of Charles Ireland and Barbara Nave. Okay. Now, what's interesting about Charles, he was a tailor, and he moved to New York City in 1840 when David was 8 years old. Now, since his father was a tailor, he bestowed the values on David to dress very, very well. And that was a big thing with him throughout his entire life. He always dressed well, work hard, dress well doing it. And this stayed with him right up until his death. And so for the most part, and the thing about it, though, is something they obviously didn't teach you with the DQ, your dress policy about dressing well, because I've seen the hats and it's not impressive,
What?
But the thing about it is Dave Ireland, he was going to be a tailor. He was a tailor's apprentice under his father. And when the Civil War broke out in April 1861, Ireland, like many men in the North, he felt the need to enlist. So in the summer of 1861, Dave Ireland finds himself as a lieutenant, okay, in the 79th New York. It's a regiment consisting of U.S. regulars, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And with it, while he's, and this is going to be important to talk about as he goes further on in his command with his later regiment we're going to talk about, while with the 79th, he's going to have that benefit of receiving training, okay, as a U.S. regular soldier.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to get the training, the discipline, the whole deal. And it's going to benefit himself, and it's going to benefit his soldiers down the road.
Yeah, it is. So as you said, he becomes part of the 79th New York. They start off as a militia, but then they get kind of, brought into the regular army. And they're mustered into federal service on May 29th, 1861. So that's when they get brought into the Civil War. And the first battle they're going to fight in is obviously First Bull Run, July 21st, 1861. Ireland is a lieutenant by this point. He's also an adjutant. The 79th is led by Colonel James Cameron. No word if he's related to the director.
Must have been
before Titanic. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to be directing Titanic after this one. But they're going to fight with General Sherman, who is then a colonel at this time. So it's Colonel Sherman with his 3rd Brigade at the first Battle of Bull Run. Now, during the battle, Cameron is going to be killed, and many of the officers, they just resign after this. A number of men just mutinied, and they were basically like, screw this, we don't want to do this. And because of this, McClellan takes their colors away. So he takes away their flag. That's a huge thing if that happens to you, when you're fighting, and you get your colors taken away, because the colors are everything. We talked about in our last episode about the 54th Massachusetts, where, there was who's going to we can't let the colors fall, right? If you get them taken away, that's a really big thing. So Ireland, though, takes over command of the 79th after this as well, but they don't have their colors. So flash forward to September 11th, 1861, we had the ambush at Lewinsville, which is near Falls Church, Virginia. And Ireland is going to lead an ambush at this. And what it is it's a very small battle, and Confederates and Union, they both lay claim to a victory here. There's no Confederate casualties. There's 3 Union troops killed and 4 are taken prisoners. This is also the battle where Jeb Stuart is promoted to general. So Jeb Stuart fans, there you go. There's a force of 1,800 troops led by Union General William Baldy Smith, and they are just going on a reconnaissance mission. And Union Colonel Isaac Stevens is here. And one of the men he's leading is Colonel David Ireland. And like I said, it's a recon mission and all that. Both sides claim victory. The recon mission happens and they start to go away. Jeb Stuart attacks them and the Union has to flee. Well, it's Ireland who is going to kind of bring up the rear guard of this and protect the army. And because of this, McClellan restores the colors to the 79th New York. So there's that. But also, Ireland gets promoted to captain, and he's going to be promoted to the 15th U.S. Infantry. And this is what leads us into him going to the Newport Barracks.
Right. So he's going to get, in the fall of 1861, like you said, he's going to get promoted to captain. And he's going to get the responsibility of recruiting troops in upstate New York for William T. Sherman, okay? His army in Ohio. Now, he's a natural recruiter. He's a sharp-looking guy, good-looking guy. Like we said before, he's dressed to the nines, always looking good.
He actually looks like he has this perpetual look of like he doesn't take any bullshit from anybody. Like, I don't know what it is about him, but he just looks like this guy that's like down to business all the time.
He probably works at the mine, Gettysburg. It's probably where he works part after the war.
Or the DQ, actually.
Well, DQ anyway. But his father must have been proud of him because he looked sharp. He dressed the part. And in early of 1862, Ireland's going to arrive in Binghamton, New York. Okay, it's a town of about 25,000 people in 1862. It sits right over the Pennsylvania border, right on that Susquehanna River, right there where it connects the Chenango River. And around this time, he always seems to meet people in his life that are influential. Had Sherman originally. He's going to meet a guy now named Sherman Phelps. Another Sherman, okay, different name. Phelps is a member of the elite Phelps family, okay? This is a family that still to this day has a strong elite impact in Binghamton, New York, to this day, okay? Phelps Mansion was built in 1870, 71, later on after the war, but they're still a very influential family, okay? And this relationship is going to tie Ireland to the Phelps family with the rest of his life, okay? Phelps was a judge. He was a successful businessman. He was a banker, but he was also an influential committee member of the 24th Regional Military District, which is guess where? Binghamton, okay? Mm-hmm. Phelps took a shine to Ireland, okay? Probably because like I say, he looked the part, the whole deal, Sherman's guys. And he had just turned 30 at this point. This is Ireland now we're talking about. And when Ireland was in Binghamton recruiting, by happenstance, okay, Phelps' niece Sarah was in town along with his nephew, a kid named Norman, okay? Sarah Phelps was just 18 years old. She was the daughter of a doctor who had ties to the local real estate, railroad industry and other New York elites in that area. So she was a very connected girl there, okay? Soon upon her arrival, Sarah Phelps and David Ireland met and soon became a hot and heavy. Okay, that's kind of what happened, all right? Now, yeah. The young dashing officer in his pristine blue uniform, he made Sarah, swoon harder than you did at the Oliver Otis Howard statue. Ooh. That's how impressive she was. That whole thing. But Ireland, he had a job to do in town, which of course is to recruit, and recruit he did. Now, the locals flocked to him like a moth to the flame, okay? And by August 1862, he had raised a regiment that would be known as the 137th New York. Of course, he'll be chosen as the man to command it, okay? And he will be given the title of colonel. The 137th, they're going to get the nickname the Ironclads. That's what they're going to be called, okay?
That's interesting.
They pulled 3 companies from Tioga County, 4 from Broome County, and 3 more from Tompkins County, all in that area. These are firemen, shopkeepers, farmers, the traditional Union type of signees, okay? That's who they were. It was written in a local newspaper that the regiment contained a noble body of men of splendid physical appearance, most of whom had been reared in the rural districts. That's what it said in the local newspaper, okay? The ages of the recruits were a wide range. They ranged from as young as 14 to as old as 50, okay? Wow. The youngest recruit was a 14-year-old kid named Ambrose Davidson, okay? He wanted to sign up, but he was too young. So to enlist, he needed to lie, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. So you know how he enlisted? He took a piece of paper with 1-8 on it, put it in his shoe. He walks up to the enlistment station. The guy says, "Are you over 18?" He says, "Yes, I am."
Oh
He's talking
my
about stick on
God.
top of his paper of
God.
1-8. So that's how he got away with it. So he enlisted. Unfortunately for him, he's going to die in 1863 in a hospital in Washington. He
Oh
ain't
my
going to make it.
God.
But that's how he got away with lying. He wrote 1-8 and said, "I'm above 1-8." Yeah, I'm on. That's how it was. So the oldest recruit, a 50-year-old guy, his name was Henry Shipman. He lived at the site of today's Phelps Mansion, okay, which was built, like I said, in early
Mhm.
1870s, give or take. And he was going to be the company of Captain F. Now, it sounds like this guy was an older 50 versus a younger 50. His body was probably whatever, okay. So according to troops, when Shipman got tired of marching, and they did a lot of marching, Ireland would stop and let him ride his horse while he walked with the troops and carried all his baggage. So this 50-year-old guy could make it.
Wow.
And these type of things, even though Ireland was a strict disciplinarian, a U.S. regular, it really made him a beloved guy amongst the troops, which is going to be important later. Okay,
Well, there was one
now what?
quote I found where I think it was the governor of New York who said, or no, it was one of his soldiers who said, "We knew him to be a kindly and gentlemanly officer and brave soldier." And I think that really illustrates what you just said about him having this guy like letting him ride on his horse, right? That uh,
He was a guy who trained them really hard. I
mhm.
have to think they didn't like him at the beginning because of how the training was. But this is a guy, and it's important. Ireland trained them as if they were U.S. regulars. He
Mhm.
gave them the same training he got. Now, a lot of these guys in these other regiments didn't get that benefit. They were trained by
Yeah.
volunteers. We talked a lot about Rufus Dawes and the Sixth Wisconsin and
Well,
the
I was gonna say
difficulties
though,
he
but
had,
like when
right?
Gibbon came in to take over the like what became the Iron Brigade, I think Gibbon trained those guys like regulars, didn't he? And that's why they became as good as they were. But I think they also came to respect him because of that. So, I mean, could we say like Ireland and Gibbon are kind of alike in that way and how they train their troops?
No, I think so. I think so. But the men really appreciate it. They didn't like
Mm.
it at the beginning. It's like tough love, but they would
Yep.
appreciate it later on. So the 137th, they trained really hard at a place called Camp Susquehanna, okay, starting on August 31st, 1862. And they were officially mustered in as a regiment of the 137th on September 25th, okay? This is just a week after the Battle of Antietam. So if things are getting really bloody, things are getting really bad.
Yep.
2 days later, the 137th is going to be led by Ireland, and they're going to leave the nest of Binghamton, okay, for war. Now, the local paper described their departure, and there was a lot of rah rah and a lot of that, but there was a lot of fear and a lot of negative vibes. The paper said, deep seated below the cheers and applause which were given to these brave soldier volunteers as they marched through the streets, there was a most profound anguish, for there had never been such a sad scene at the homes of these enlisted boys and men when the hour came to which they had to say their goodbyes. Okay. So these guys were trained, they were fired up to go, but they would have, at this point, it got real, really, really quick. Now, just to tell about the organization, these guys, the organization, the 137th is placed in the 12th Corps in the Army of the Potomac under the newly hired Henry Slocum. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's the Corps commander who had just taken over for Joseph Mansfield, who got killed at Antietam like a week before. Okay, so now you're going to do command as far as Corps command. Ireland's direct boss was a brigade commander, a 61-year-old Rhode Islander named George Sears Green. And we'll
Paps
talk a lot
Green.
about him. Paps Green, okay? And they'll report to their division commander, a fellow Scot of all things, John Geary from Pennsylvania. So
Mm-hmm.
here we go with Scotland again. Now, the 137th is going to have to wait to see their first action, though, because they were listed as a reserve in the Battle of Fredericksburg. They didn't see any action at Fredericksburg, probably for the best, okay? And they had to settle him in the winter. They had to witness Ambrose Burnside and his Mud March
They're
fiasco
on
in
the Mud
January
March, aren't they?
1863. And so they had to deal with all that.
Yeah.
This was kind of their baptism. Ireland's men are going to finally see the elephant, as they say, on May 2nd, 1863, near Fairview at the Battle of Chancellorsville, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Not far from the 11th Corps by old what's his name? He was right on the corner from them.
Howard.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot who that was. But this was Ireland's first personal experience leading troops in a battle as a commander of a regiment.
And they're near Catherine
And
Furnace, right? And they're just
they're They're just southeast of Catherine Furnace, if you know the area, by
Hmm.
Fairview, okay? They're not going to see any infantry combat, but they are going to be shelled relentlessly in their position, okay? And they suffered 55 casualties, including their first regimental death, the first death of anybody in the 137th, a 16-year-old boy, a private. Ireland, he's going to write afterwards of this, of the unit, that they manifested much coolness and bravery. So picture them. They still haven't seen fire yet, but they're sitting there as artillery is raining down on them and they can't move. They're stuck there. And that's kind of their baptism. So despite the butt kicking that the entire Union Army took at that battle, Ireland is going to proudly say that that regiment did not lose one color. Going back to your color story,
Hmm.
from okay again, they did not lose one. They were the last regiment in the entire Union Army to cross the Rapidan after the battle.
Yeah.
So what he's trying to say is, look, we weren't in it, but we showed a lot of bravery, right? And the men, they got that valuable experience of being under fire, because it's really at Gettysburg we're going to talk about where the 137th really takes off. And like I said earlier, due to the exclusion from books and movies, most people don't really know their story at Gettysburg. But when we talk about Gettysburg here, what they did at Gettysburg is one of the most important must-haves of the Union Army,
It.
and
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it not only needs to be heard, but it needs to be learned. Okay,
Yeah, and
as
I think
one of the greatest military moments in American history.
I completely agree, and I have to say, to really understand what Ireland and his men, they are the right flank of the Union Army, um, at Gettysburg. You have to go to Culp's Hill. You absolutely need to. So I mean, if you're going to Gettysburg, I mean, go to Culp's Hill. It is, I mean, and really, you can't go to Round Top, but even if Round Top are open, go to Culp's Hill, because it's going to help you to understand exactly what Ireland and his men do here in the 137th New York, because it is like, you'll go there and you'll be like, what the hell? Like, that's how I am every time I go there. I'm like, how did they do this? And I mean, thankfully, Darren, that's because of you, because you do tell the story so well of Ireland and his men and what they do here.
Well, I mean, without going into the whole story of the history of the battle at Gettysburg, up to that,
Yeah.
by the battle's second day, the Union Army, they're going to hold the high ground on Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill. It's a pair of elevations south of the town. That was the key part of the battlefield for both armies. The 12th Corps had 6 total brigades. Okay, they were positioned on Culp's Hill. A hill has 2 peaks. Okay, Upper Culp's Hill is about 600 feet above sea level, and it's connected to a smaller hill, Lower Culp's Hill. And in between the two, there's like a saddle or a little patch of slow undulating ground, okay, between the two that kind of
Rolling
connects them,
Hills.
okay? Exactly. The land is going to be owned by a local named Henry Culp, okay? It's a heavily wooded area with boulders strewn all over the place. And the underbrush is going to be kind of thinned out because of the animals. Just picture like a picnic ground. That's how it looks. But it's steep and it's wooded. And the way it looks right now, if you go to Gettysburg, is pretty much the way it looked at the battle. Maybe it's grown a little bit more lately, but when they did the whole other work, it was very, very accurate. By July 2nd, okay, this is the second day of the battle now, the Union knew holding Culp's Hill was crucial. Now, it was the high ground behind the Union line that stood over Baltimore Pike. Baltimore Pike is a straight shot to Washington, D.C. It turns into Georgia Avenue, okay? And it's one of 2 supply roads that George Meade's going to have for the Army of the Potomac. The other, of course, is Taneytown, which leads to Westminster. So they have to hold these roads, but especially Baltimore Pike is
Mm.
behind the Union line. So around 4 p.m. In the afternoon on July 2nd, James Longstreet's Confederate Corps is going to do their thing on the other side on the Union left. This is going to result in the battles of Round Top, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard, all that stuff that people know at Gettysburg. Okay, the sightings of Rosewood's clown was probably seen for the first time somewhere around here, but fearing the battle could be lost on that side of the battlefield. I mentioned those 6 brigades on Culp's Hill.
Yep.
5 of them are going to get redeployed from the 12th Corps to that part of the battlefield to defend the Union position. Now, that's going to leave just 1 brigade, led by George Sears Green, to hold that hill. And it was that urgent hold for the Union. Okay, so just imagine the situation now. It's getting late in the afternoon. What you had at one point, 6 brigades, 22 regiments you had. Now you strip to to basically 1 brigade and 5 regiments. Okay, you're gonna be left with just New Yorkers: 60th, the 102nd, the 78th, the 149th, and the 137th. Okay, and because they were stripped of manpower, instead of that shoulder to shoulder double rank that you used to seeing, you're talking about a full social distancing
I
situation.
was just gonna
Okay.
say you put it so well in our live that we did on Sunday, like saying like they're basically social distancing from each other in this, and not because they have to, but because they have no choice, because they've lost, so many men to go elsewhere on the battlefield, right? And so they have
And so
no
that,
choice but
yeah,
to spread themselves out like that.
they're basically at arm's length from each other. Okay. Now, Green, the thing about Green, okay, besides being a Rhode Islander, so he knows what he's talking about, Mary. Probably a Patriot fan too. Go Pats, by the way. Opening weekend, right?
You just got a
He was
high
a
five there from our Rhode Island
okay.
listeners.
Very good. Excellent. But he was a trained engineer, so he knew the land, he knew the importance of terrain. So, especially fighting defensively, which he knew he was going to have to do. So, despite the protests of his division commander, John Geary, who told him no, he's going to go ahead and build breastworks to protect his brigade. Geary felt that fighting with breastworks gave soldiers an unnecessary feeling of if you fought without them, you weren't as good, or some silly phrase he said.
Oh my God.
But Green felt that the saving of a life meant more than some silly philosophy, so he did them, and thank God they did. Okay, he also repositioned his men along the slope. Okay, he's going to have the 60th, followed by the 102nd, the 78th, the 149th, and then Ireland is going to be on the flank. He put Ireland on the flank because they were better trained. These U.S. regular trained type guys. Okay, so he's on the right flank of the entire Union Army. Okay. Now we'll never know if Green gave a sappy speech like Strong Vincent in the movie.
I was
You're
just
the
gonna.
end. You cannot, sir. You must be stubborn.
I
You
was just
cannot
gonna
advance.
say, like, is this one like we are the flank?
You'll be taken by the rear. You know, like he was. I don't know if he does that. But one thing he did do is he did tell him that your flank, your right flank, is in the air. It's not positioned up against anything. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's going to tell Ireland and his men to dig a traverse or a trench, and the soldiers of the 137 did not like this. It was hot. They were sick of building breastworks. Now they got to do another one. So they grumbled, but they had to build a traverse that basically set off to a right angle. And thank God they did. It's going to prove to save their lives later on. So by 5 o'clock now, Confederate General Allegheny Johnson, okay, he's in the second division under Richard Ewell's Second Corps. Guess what's going to happen, Mary? He's going to notice that suddenly all those soldiers up on the hill aren't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he sees an opportunity here, okay, that maybe, just maybe he has a chance to do something with that hill. So what seemed like that Gibraltar of what it's seen before now looks very vulnerable. And if the Rebs are going to attack right up the hill and they get up there, this could be a game changer. Okay. So they're going to start that attack. All right. They're going to go up the hill and they're going to hit right in the middle of the line. They're going to hit the 149th, which is just on the left of Ireland's 137th. So it's going to lead to a bunch of fire. Before you know it, okay, Ireland, he's got 423 men. That's all he has. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In his front, he has 6 Confederate regiments coming at him under a guy named George Stewart, also known as Maryland Stewart. Okay. Yep. Guess where he was from?
Virginia.
With that nickname. No, he was from Maryland.
Oh, right.
But
he commanded the 10th Virginia, didn't he?
No, he was in charge of the brigade. He was the brigade commander for that. So, his 6 regiments was the 1st and 3rd North Carolina, the 10th, 23rd, 37th Virginia, and the 1st Maryland Battalion. Okay. They have 2,121 men. Okay. Quick math formula, Mary. 2121 versus 423. What kind of ratio is that?
That's not a good ratio. Even I can say that as somebody who sucks at math.
It's almost exactly 5-1. Okay.
Wow.
George Stewart has a 5-1 man advantage. Okay, against Ireland's 137. This is what it's going to come down to. Okay. Ireland knew, because he was at the end of the line, that he could not retreat at any cost. He had to stay. So again, with darkness falling, okay, and all these brigades coming at him face to face, besides that, everything seemed to be okay.
Yeah.
And
But
that's
he's
kind of
in
how.
but earlier in the day, earlier in the day we have Chamberlain doing what he does at Round Top. Ireland is now pretty much in the same position to what Chamberlain was, except he's in the dark, right?
We're going to talk about Chamberlain here in a minute. We're
Yeah.
going to talk about that. But yeah, that's just interesting parallel. Okay, he must have knew that he was in a bad spot. He's going to get word now. Now this is when you start to draw the parallels with the other side going on. He's going to find out that four of Maryland Stewart's regiments, this is the 1st North Carolina, and 37th, the 10th, and the 23rd VA, Virginia, they're trying to get around and turn his flank now,
Mhm.
okay? And these Confederates have positioned themselves behind a stone wall right on Lower Culp's Hill now. So on the far end of Ireland's line is Company A. And to their left is Company F, okay? Now, both companies started to take heavy fire on their extreme right flank now. So they're kind of screwed. Ireland sees this, and he's going to order Company A to refuse the line, which means you break off and you turn at a right angle, okay, to face the oncoming enemy. This is going to slow them down a little bit initially, but what's going to ultimately end up happening, as you can imagine, is just going to force the Confederates to swing further.
Mhm.
Okay. So now at one point, the 10th Virginia, under a guy named Edward Warren, is pretty much directly behind Ireland's line. He's right up the Savannah. Okay. So
Ooh.
now this will be when Ireland's pucker effect moment is going to take over. Okay. And it's because he knows he's seriously in a tough situation. He's got Rebs in the fronts, he's got his flank threatened. Now his rear is threatened, and he's also in the dark. Okay, so around this time, a guy named Colonel Richard Smith of the 71st Pennsylvania comes bopping by. They're going to be coming north from Spangler Spring. Okay, and this is going to be right in the middle of when this firefight's going on. Now, Ireland's doing whatever he can to plug the gaps. You can only imagine. It's dark. Their guys are all covered
Yeah.
in crap, and it's just you can only imagine the flash, the muzzles. Smith of the 71st Pennsylvania is going to see the trouble Ireland is in. And he had the opportunity, I guess, to help out. But guess what he does, okay? After a brief fight, he gets involved for a second. He's going to lose 14 guys. And you know what he does? He says, screw this, and he leaves.
Yeah.
And he leaves Ireland holding his diaper in the rain, literally and figuratively, okay? After the battle, okay, Smith's going to say, um, he didn't stay to help because he didn't want to see his men murdered. That's what he said. So he left Ireland's guys
Oh my god.
just left them. Said the hell with this, right? Now, Ireland is going to be basically on his own at this point, right? And he's going to have at this point he's going to have his men wheel to the right again.
Mhm.
And this time they're going to set up behind that traverse they dug.
Mhm.
Okay, so now they this traverse they had to reluctantly build earlier in the day. Now they got a little bit of protection now, thanks to that traverse that they really didn't want to build. Now, this is very much like you were saying before, like Chamberlain
It
in
is.
the 20th Maine, a little round top. Okay, Ireland refused his line that was being out when he was being outflanked by the Rebs. The difference, of course, is this: is unlike Chamberlain, who held out against two regiments, the 15th and 47th Alabama, he did this against an entire brigade, okay, of 2,121 guys. That's how long he did,
Yeah.
okay? That's how many guys he went against. Now, behind the barricade, rather, and with darkness falling, this 137th New York was able to kind of hold Stuart's brigade back. And this is where darkness helped them out a little bit. They held out for a full hour behind this traverse, fighting these guys. In the dark, not knowing what the hell was going on. You had situations where Stuart's men were firing over the Union line and hitting their own guys on the other side. It was a
Yeah.
complete cluster, okay?
I was reading about that, how that was happening. I was like, holy freak,
But
like
but you
what
know,
the hell?
but wait, there's more. Okay,
Oh.
so as the battle starts to slacken, okay, Maryland's guys start to fall back. The shots start to slow down a
Yeah.
little bit. Guess what happens is Joseph Gregg of Company I, okay, he's going to be ordered to do a bayonet charge.
Yeah.
And he's going to run right, they're going to run right at the 10th Virginia,
He's
who
so
must have been now,
badass for doing that. He's just like, fuck this. We're going to go do this.
it must have been the last thing, okay? The last thing those Virginians expected was these guys running right at him. Now, sadly, Greg is going to be mortally wounded in this
Yeah.
charge, okay? But what it's going to do, it's going to drive the Virginians back down the hill, back down Lower Culp Hill. And what it's going to do, it's going to pretty much stabilize Culp's Hill now, and it's going to keep the Union Army, thanks to Ireland, that 137, from maintaining Culp's Hill
Yeah.
throughout that battle. So as it goes on, the night goes on, those 5 brigades I mentioned who left the dance floor to go fight against Longstreet's guys,
Mm.
they're going to slowly start to come back. It's going to take some time. It's dark. They're going to get lost. They're going to finally make it back. When they do get back to Culp's Hill, they're going to find a lot of Confederates in their entrenchments from where they were. It's going to lead to that next day's battle with Charles Mudge and the Second Mass
Yep.
and the Indians. It's all going to lead to that. But now, what it's going to do, it's going to ultimately, thanks to Greene's breastworks and the decision making of Ireland, they're going to be able to hold out against those odds, and they're going to be able to kind of stem that Confederate tide.
Yep.
Okay. And the battle goes on. So July 3rd, around 4 o'clock in the morning, the Rebs are going to kind of renew the fight back on Culp's Hill. Except now, instead of those 5 brigades left over from Greene, they're fighting those 22 brigades again. Now,
Yeah.
some of the guys have been lost admittedly through the battle. And the 137 is going to return to their original position, which is kind of right in the middle of the line. But at the end of the day, Ireland's regiment is going to take a beating here. Of the 423 guys I mentioned at the beginning, 40 are going to be killed, 87 wounded, 10 missing, for a total of 137. Ironically, the same number as their regiment numbers,
Yep.
137 casualties. That's 32%. I'm going to save you the math. 32% casualties they're going to have for this.
Wow.
Okay. After the battle, Lieutenant Collins from the 149th New York, okay, the one that was just to their left, right next to him from Syracuse, okay, he's going to describe in his memoirs the state of the 137th right afterwards. And he's going to write, the survivors of the 137th New York looked sad and mournful as they marched away. Many had eyes filled with tears. Okay, these guys had had enough. They'd been through hell. They just about had it.
Mhm.
This was their real first fight, their
And-
first one.
And you have to look at how well they did, right? Like, they're held in reserve at Fredericksburg, so they really don't get anything. I mean, now Ireland, he's seen the elephant, I think, at First Bull Run, right? Being with Sherman's guys, that they made it further than a lot of other Union troops that day. They experienced some very hard fighting. I mean, all Union troops did, but Sherman's troops were the ones that got really close to Jackson, right? But I think, these guys, to be at Gettysburg, they're held in reserve at Fredericksburg. They don't really see much at Chancellorsville. To experience this and do what they did, but just to witness the horrors of it. Like, one guy said that on July 3rd, when they were still fighting, the whole hillside seemed enveloped in a blaze. I can't imagine what these guys saw here at Culp's Hill. And I mean, if you're at Culp's Hill, you can understand why when Ireland and, or when Greg, when he manages to drive those guys back with that bayonet charge, why they don't come back up. That hill it's a bitch to climb. It is. There's rocks, there's roots digging out from trees. I mean, you do it once and you're like, yay, I did it. And then you get driven back and you're like, I am not doing that again. It is brutal.
But you know what, though? As much as, those soldiers they lost, like I said, 137 casualties in 137 New York, right? It's funny how numbers work out sometimes. 32%. Despite all that, the men still were thankful for the training they got. After the whole, after this whole thing is over, Henry Shipman, that 50-year-old guy we mentioned, he's back again. He's going to write afterwards, the men in the regiment would not change Colonel Ireland for any officer in the entire Union Army. That's what he said, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is how much has been respected him. So after the Battle of Gettysburg, okay, the Army could not be happier with what he did, okay? So David Ireland, they're going to give a furlough to. Now here's what they did. They knew he had Sarah back in Binghamton, and he knew. So what they did is they gave him a wink wink recruiting mission back to Binghamton. Okay, it wasn't a furlough; it was a recruiting mission. So they sent him back, and it was really a reward for the effort he did at Gettysburg, so he can go back and see Sarah. Okay, that's what they did for him. So he does it, August 23rd, 1863. Guess what happens? Ireland and Sarah Phelps, they get themselves married.
Nice.
Okay, they're gonna get married in Judge Sherman Phelps, her uncle's home. Okay, the ceremony was conducted by a local pastor named Horace Winslow. Now, this whole guise of a recruiting trip was known by everybody. So during the ceremony, Winslow said this of the couple. This is what he said at the wedding. He wrote, "The gallant Colonel Ireland of the 137th New York Regiment, it will be seen by our marriage column. He has been on a recruiting trip to this village. We congratulate him on his selection of a new aide de camp and wish him a smooth and prosperous campaign in the battle of life."
Wow.
Okay. So they're saying is he has a recruiting trip and he came and he found himself a wife.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's how they did it. Now, the problem with being in the Army, Mary, is you can't stick around too long. So unfortunately for the newlyweds, their time together is going to be short on this trip. I imagine those couple of days they spent all that time probably talking about battle lines and file closures.
Sure.
They probably, that's probably what they did the whole entire time. So now, while this is all going on, I don't know if you know this, Mary, but there was also a Western theater.
Okay. Oh, I was just about to mention that.
And so in the Western theater, the war was raging in Tennessee. Now, the 12th Corps, which was currently camped in Virginia, is going to be shipped via train to the Western Theater to join U.S. Grant's Army. And this is going to include the 137th New York. Mm-hmm. So Ireland had to say goodbye to Sarah again and return to the front. So once again, now in the West, the 137th is going to be thrown right into the fire again.
They are. And I was going to say, along with, just this moving out west is not just the 12th Corps and a lot of the regiments that are with them at Gettysburg, but also the 11th Corps. Joseph Hooker goes out there too. But the one thing about this that, the 12th Corps is kind of like, the 11th, 12th Corps kind of like the island of misfit toys when it comes to the Army of the Potomac. But they're going to go out west. 137th with David Ireland is going to go out there, and they're going to be part of a few battles in the Western Theater that are quite key in securing the city of Chattanooga, but also Atlanta as well.
Yeah, so they're going to go west, and they're going to be part of that siege of Chattanooga we talked about. Ireland's men are going to find themselves again at the end of the line, this time at the Battle of Wauhatchie on August 28th and the 29th. This is that midnight to 3 a.m. shit show, okay?
Yep.
And they had to fight for 3 hours in that early morning because the Rebs are trying to shut down that new open cracker line that William Rosecrans had gone through and settle that whole thing. Rosecrans, Mary.
Good guy.
Not for nothing. But so this is during the Chattanooga siege when Bragg is trying to basically starve them out. They open that supply line. Now the Rebs are going to try to shut that supply line down. And this is going to be where Ireland and his guys are going to stand up again, be put again on the end of the flank.
Yep. And
they're going to help secure and push the Rebs back to keep that supply line open. So they're still in it again, right? A month later, at the actual Battle of Chattanooga, okay?
In November.
137, they're gonna fight with Joseph Hooker at Lookout Mountain in the famous Battle Above the Clouds, right? And they're gonna help chase Bragg.
Not just pure romance. Sorry.
They're gonna fight. Bragg, chase him into North Carolina. To north of Georgia, and it's funny because I forget the name of the regiment that was behind them, but as they were chasing the Rebs up Lookout Mountain, the Rebs dropped their flags and ran.
Yep.
The regiment behind them picked up the flags, and a lot of those guys got medals of honor for getting the flags.
Yeah.
And the New Yorkers were pissed at that.
Oh, I can't blame them for that. Well, when we go to Lookout Mountain, we'll have to see if we can find all those monuments for them too.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, there's no question. And but there's Ireland again. By this time, he's a brigade commander now, so he's going to be commanding those same New York brigades that he was going to be doing. Right now, the following winter now, Ireland's men are going to be in winter camp in a place called Stevenson, Alabama.
Mm.
Okay. This is a railroad town full of bars and bang barns and all this stuff, right? But it was also a vital railroad connection for supplies
Yep.
for the troops. No, it's funny because while in Stevenson, Ireland must have had the reputation of being just this guy, just this tough, whatever. They gave him the task in his spare time while he was supposed to be relaxing in winter camp to clean up the town, be a sort of pseudo sheriff in Stevenson,
Oh
Alabama.
my God,
Okay,
really?
so he was in charge of getting rid of all the hookers, the gamblers, the transplanted Canadians, all the bad seed.
What?
Okay,
Transplanted Canadians?
but he had to clean up the town, and by all accounts, he did a pretty good job of it. We're just getting rid of the riffraff in town.
Oh my
Apparently
God.
he did it, but during this winter break, okay, Ireland's going to get visited by Sarah. She's
Mm.
going to jump on the train and visit from Binghamton, take the ride down to Stevenson, and she's going to stay with Dave for Ireland for 3 months
Ooh.
in camp now. Okay, yeah, exactly, right. So this was kind of the closest thing to a honeymoon these people are going to have. So in early May, though, that honeymoon is going to come to an end because he's going to be ordered to join Sherman again.
Yep.
But everything's full circle, right? To George William T. Sherman on his march to take Atlanta.
Yep.
And so with tears in her eyes, she's going to board the train back to New York. And sadly, this is the last time they're ever going to meet. Is this moment? And I guess it was quite an emotional thing. And Ireland's going to be part of that of the Atlanta campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
He's going to be in the middle.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, he's going to find himself in the middle of everything. Resaca, Dallas, New Hope. He's going to be in Kolb's Farm, Kennesaw, Marietta,
Peachtree Creek.
Peachtree Creek, all of it right into Atlanta. Ireland is his guys are going to be in the middle of all of this. Okay, when it's all said and done, the 137 New Yorkers are going to be involved in 18 different engagements. 18.
The Atlanta campaign has so many different engagements in it.
But I mean the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
he's soup to nuts here. Okay,
Yeah.
he misses Fredericksburg, but from Fredericksburg to Bentonville, they're going to be involved in everything in between. Now, here's the cool thing about this, though, Mary. Okay, September 2nd, 1864. Okay, you know what day that is? That's the day Atlanta falls, right?
That's the day Slocum walks into Atlanta, and he's like, "Is this my?"
But guess who the first officer into Atlanta is?
It's David Ireland.
David Ireland.
Yep.
Okay, and so you know what he does? It's like when you walk in. Say you have a roommate with some friends, right?
Yeah.
You walk into an apartment. You're the first one there. What do? You pick out the biggest room.
Mm-hmm.
He walks in. He picks John Bell Hood's headquarters as his headquarters. So that big mansion that Hood had just vacated, Ireland says, "You know what? This looks good to me. I'm taking this one," and he does.
Amazing.
And there is one of two known pictures of David Ireland that exists. One is the one you see with his hand in his pocket.
Yep.
The other is him and his officers in front of the house that John Bell Hood in Atlanta stood in.
That's awesome.
And you can see him standing there. It's only one of two pictures. So
that is
it's like
cool. So I don't know, like that's balls right there. It's like, hey, look at me, Hood. Look at me, Hood. Oh, I would too. I would too.
But all the good times kind of come to an end though, because September 2nd he gets into Atlanta, and almost immediately he gets sick. Okay, and whether it's the bad food or the dirty water or who the hell knows what, he's going to be hit with a bad case of dysentery almost immediately, like right off the bat. He's going to he's going to get dehydrated. And 8 days later, on September 10th, to the shock of his men, Ireland's going to die. And they are going to be stunned by this. Stunned, right? It was the regimental chaplain, a guy named Captain Eli Roberts, who's going to personally take the body of Ireland back to Binghamton. And 3 days after he died, okay, the Binghamton Republic, he was scheduled to go back to Binghamton for a leave.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And he didn't make it. But the newspaper writes this in the newspaper. It is a painful due to announce the death of Colonel David Ireland. We understand his wife Sarah was expecting soon a visit from her husband. He is on the way, but alas, comes in the sad habiliments of the dead. another noble martyr to the cause of the Union. So she's literally expecting him to show up on her doorstep. Instead, she gets his coffin.
Oh
Unfortunately,
God.
so you can only imagine how that must have gone, right?
Yeah.
Ireland's is going to be buried in Spring Forest Cemetery in Binghamton. He died with no money. I mean, he was a soldier. So that judge we talked about, Sherman Phelps,
Yep.
would have paid for his burial. And if you go to Spring Forest Cemetery now, he has a gorgeous gravestone. Okay, and it's believed that that's who paid for it was Phelps. This is the same cemetery that holds the remains of John Cleveland Robinson from
Oh.
Gettysburg. Ironically,
Hmm.
it's also the same cemetery that holds that 14-year-old boy who lied about his 18-year-old age.
Oh.
Okay, Ambrose Davidson, he's buried there too, and that is going to pretty much finish the tale of David Ireland. And but the thing about it is his legacy kind of goes on, right? They say you never really die as long as you're remembered,
Hmm.
right? That's the old saying.
Yep.
Okay, Sarah, his wife, his ex-wife, she's going to remarry twice. She's gonna rebound, okay? And but she was always going to be known as Mrs. David Ireland to the members of 137 New York. She was a regular guest at their reunions. She would still go.
Wow.
In 19, she lived until 1919. Okay, when she's going to die, she's buried in Syracuse next to her third husband, a guy named William Gear, who was a wealthy engineer in the area. But basically, she would go to the reunions. She would see the soldiers. They'd call her Mrs. Ireland.
Wow.
Um, and that's the sad part about it though is to this day the story of David Ireland really isn't well known. He and his wife Sarah had no children, so and there was no story to be told after that, especially his role at Gettysburg. For the most part, he dies and he's a hero locally, but there's no one to tell his tale. There were 63 medals of honor given at the Battle of Gettysburg. 63. You know who didn't get one? David
David
Ireland
Ireland. Neither did
did
Charles
not get one.
Tilden.
Right. But Ireland was not a recipient, regardless of
Wow.
his heroism, who I think a lot of people say is the true hero of the Battle of Gettysburg, especially on the flank. And
Mm.
sadly, he's fallen from the cracks of history because really no one's been around to tell his tale.
I I completely agree with you on that. Having visited Culp's Hill quite a few times in the last year, with you, and just wandering down and looking up at where the Union was and what he was doing. It's like holy shit. I mean, he is the unsung hero of Gettysburg, I think, with this on the right flank, with what he had to do, with, I mean, how spread out his men had to be. But not only that, he reminds me a lot of John Gibbon in the sense that, when Gibbon took over what became the Iron Brigade, they didn't like him at first because he was disciplining them in a way that they'd never been disciplined before. But then they came to recognize it after a battle that, wow, this guy did good things. And Gibbon was at every single reunion, with those guys, even though he was not from where they were. I mean, Gibbon was born in Pennsylvania. He was raised in the Carolinas, right? Um, and I think in some ways, it, it's a similar story to David Ireland's. How respected David Ireland is a lot like John Gibbon with the Iron Brigade. It's a
Yeah,
it's very
I
similar to
I
that
think,
too.
but I think Gibbon's legacy is one that goes. I mean,
Oh, it is.
people know the Gettys,
But
the
nobody,
Iron Brigade.
but again, yeah, that's where it differs. Is nobody knows who Ireland is, but they should because of that, because of what he does. Um, he's, I mean, anybody who goes to Culp's Hill, you'll see it there. You'll know
No,
what he
there's no
did.
question. There's no question. But I think it's a good place to drop. I think it's a good story. I think it's one. If you go to Gettysburg, you're going to go to Culp's Hill.
Hmm.
Find the 137 New York. Take a peek. It's tough to find the traverse that's kind of built over a little bit, but you can see where it is. It's kind of right where the saddle is. It kind of the road kind of dips and it goes across the road. Just imagine yourself in that position. It's nighttime. You're being attacked by 2,100 guys. You're 400 guys. They're going around to your right. Now you're in this traverse, in this ditch, this trench. fighting and fighting and fighting, and you're able to hold them off. And this is your first real infantry battle. And because of your actions, you're able to push them down the hill until those 5 other regiments come back. Those remaining 17 brigades are going to come back to bail you out. And it isn't too a reach to say that if Johnson, Allegheny Johnson, and those guys get up on Culp's Hill, you're behind the Union line. You have that supply road of Baltimore Pike. It's hard to imagine how that July 2nd War Council meeting is going to play out, knowing that they're
Yeah.
right behind you. You may have to leave at that point.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, the fact that they were not up there has a lot to do with David Ireland's 137th. So
Exactly.
nothing against the Chamberlain people, because what he did was very important too. But I think because of the movie, people like Ireland don't get the credit they do. Take a peek on the other flank, because sometimes the other flank tells a better story. In this case, it's true.
No, I completely agree with that. It's a lot like the Battle of Chickamauga, where if they had let them get through on that Lafayette Road to Chattanooga, things would have not went so great for the Union Army. You know, the other thing too about Ireland is and the 137th is these are guys that fought in not only the Eastern Theater but the Western Theater, and they went to the end of the Civil War. And unfortunately, Ireland is not with them at Bentonville. But these are guys that they saw so much. They're on the march to the sea, and they go right through it to the end of the Civil War. They're not there at the beginning because they don't come into it until Antietam, but they're there at the end, and they see so much. And it's unfortunate that Ireland was not there to witness the end of it, because he was there at the beginning with the 79th New York at First Bull Run.
No doubt, no doubt. So no disrespect to Chamberlain on his birthday,
No,
by the way, as
not
we
at
sit here
all.
and record this. But I think it's ironic on a date when a historical person dies in Scotland, we're going to throw a little bit of light on another historical
Yep.
person born in Scotland who doesn't obviously
And
get
what
as
day
much
does he
credit
die? He
as
dies
that.
on September the 10th, right?
September,
1864.
which is coming up the day this episode is going
Yeah,
to
the
drop.
day this
So,
episode drops. So the day you guys,
oh,
if you're listening
irony.
to this
It's
on
irony.
September the 10th, this is the anniversary of David Ireland's death.
It is. All right. So that'll do it with us. So what's coming up next for us? Do you even know?
We are going to be recording an episode with some guests, hopefully soon. We are going to be doing an episode about Special Order 191 and talking about that and its implications for the Maryland campaign, Battle of Antietam, and all that. We are going to be having our roundtable this month in September as well. And we'll have some book club news to share with you soon as well. So we just want to thank you all for listening to us for these last 92 episodes. And before he can say any final words from you, Darren, you are an amazing co-host. And thank you for all your knowledge on David Ireland. And also thank you for all the tours on Culp's Hill that you've given me, because you have given me such an appreciation for that part of Gettysburg. Thank you.
Well, you got to go to Culp's. Culp's is the way to go. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Everybody have a great night, and hope your football team loses, unless you're the Patriots this weekend. And we will look forward to talking to you also. So fun stuff coming down the road. Off we go. So, Mary, again, the pleasure, as we say, is always all yours. And we will talk to you all on the other side.
See you guys later.